morning. We're City Schoolyard Garden, and we're here in Charlottesville, Virginia at the Friendship Court Urban Farm. I'm Jeanette Abinator.
Chantel Bingham.
Richard Morris.
I'm the Executive Director at City Schoolyard Garden.
And I'm the Program Director for the Charlottesville Food Justice Network.
And I'm the Farm and Food Roots Program Director for Urban Agriculture Collective of Charlottesville, UACC.
And my background is I used to work with the Community Food Security Coalition with national food security issues. And I'm a farmer.
I officially started at CSG in 2016, straight out of college from the University of Virginia. I studied my master's in public health. And also when I was at UVA, I did a lot of work in the community. Started this Growing for Change, this organization, really focused on public housing, access to land, growing, and food insecurity.
I used to work in software. Then I spent 10 years at this really cool farm that produced amazing food for affluent people. And I thought, that's all good and that's great, but I wanted to also be able to provide good quality food for people who might not normally otherwise be able to afford it.
At City Schoolyard Garden, we have a strategic framework that starts with our values. And so the fact that you asked the question about values is really aligned with who we are. And we wanted to share a little bit about some of the values that we put into work.
So one of my core values is youth and resident leadership. We do a lot of youth and resident leadership both through the Youth Food Justice Program and then the Community Food Justice Advocates Program at City Schoolyard Garden. It's in partnership with the Charlottesville Food Justice Network, which is a program at City Schoolyard Garden.
I grew up in a poor and working class neighborhood, and my mom always had a large garden in the backyard. And sometimes when our neighbors didn't have enough food to eat, they knew that they could come to our house and be fed. I feel like I've come full circle because that's a little bit of what I do now in my capacity here at UACC. It's growing and sharing food and stories with the community.
And the one I wanted to talk about was integrity, because we work to take our values, put them into practice, and then make that practice connected to the action, and then the action connected to the impact. And we're frequently going back and revisiting those to make sure that there's that integral thread that goes throughout.
My community are the urban growers in Charlottesville. That's UACC, that's IRC New Roots that serves the refugee community and others. We produce about 10,000 pounds of food per year.
So my community is quite large. It's about 40 plus organizations that compose the Charlottesville Food Justice Network. We also work along with city council and city departments, as well as foundations and the University of Virginia. So I guess in a small snapshot, the Charlottesville Food Justice Network brings together nonprofit partners, academic institutions, as well as funders and residents as well.
And my community is the group of organizations. So City Schoolyard Garden, it was a small nonprofit that does gardening in the public schools. But then we joined, there's the Urban Agricultural Collective that Richard mentioned, the Charlottesville Food Justice Network that Chantel mentioned, Charlottesville City Schools. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with the Game Changers Lab is to explore how to create a cohesive unit. We're thinking about calling it Cultivate Charlottesville. And we see these 6 months as an opportunity to dig into our partnerships and figure out how best to align them to impact our community food security. We started, but just come on in.
Hi, my name is Tamara Wright. I got started with the community gardens here quite a few years ago as they were transitioning from QCC to UACC. Farmer Todd asked me if I was interested in being involved, if I appreciated the gardens being in the community, and I did, and chose to work with them, and I've been here ever since.
Can you share about the Community Advocate Program?
Yes, the Community Advocate Program is a program designed to build up leaders around food insecurities. So we have advocacy in so many other areas in Charlottesville. We feel that it's important that folks learn to advocate and speak up for themselves around food justice.
Next question was, what have we learned from previous approaches to addressing food insecurity? And one thing is that even though there have been numerous, what your research said, like more than 30 organizations working, or
over 50
over the years in some way around food insecurity, that we really haven't moved the needle on hunger in Charlottesville. And so we need a new innovative approach, which is why we came together to try to partner and collaborate to change the way we're having impact.
You know, what I've discovered about the past approaches is that even though we work really hard to produce a lot of food, it's not enough to solve the food insecurity problem. But we need these spaces in order to meet that bare minimum.
I think a lot of food insecurity approaches or hunger approaches really just focus on that one person. So it's something like they want to teach nutritional classes or just give food for a day. It's a lot of individual strategies, and it kind of just puts the blame on that one family for not eating the correct way. It puts the blame on that one family for health inequities that are really more part of a systemic problem. Not a lot of interventions really look at people's environments as a whole and say, well, what are cities doing to prevent food deserts? That's not only significant for Charlottesville, but a lot of cities across the U.S. is redevelopment and kind of the legacy of destroying predominantly Black African American communities in the U.S. around the 1960s and 70s to create things like affordable or public housing. When destroy a whole community, you're really taking their power away from them. You're taking the ownership away from them to be able to grow and produce and sell their own produce to their own. You're taking their wealth. So some of what we do is like kind of food as a wealth asset building in the Charlottesville Food Justice Network and City Schoolyard Garden and UACC.
I definitely agree with what you just said, and looking at it that way, because it's easy for food banks and other organizations to just supplement food temporarily, but the biggest thing is to make sure that people are able to eat on a regular basis. And I think by the programs that we have now, with teaching folks about nutrition and urban farming and where their food is coming from, that puts the power back in their hands. But with redevelopment and different transitional programs, a lot of folks are able to rise above and are slowly moving out of these low-income communities. So this is something that they can take with them. I think with this approach and this model, it puts the control back in folks' hands, and they get to make a bigger decision for their own lives and the lives of their families.
So why do we want to engage in this 6-month process of creating Cultivate Charlottesville, or whatever we decide to be called?
And like this, when I started out doing this, I never could see myself in a role of advocacy the way that I'm doing it. But by being in a situation to have a need, it's taught me that there are more folks like me.
One of the things that the network's about is like how can we collaborate and build partnerships, and it's been really hard at sometimes to just articulate what does a systems building movement and systems change look like. Why do we think it's so important to like create space at the table for community leaders, and why are we also trying to organize nonprofit leaders and work with the city and work in the city schools? But our focus is systems change, and one of the reasons why I'm excited to participate in Game Changers, so we could just like get our image together.
Yeah, for me too, like talking about the Unite the Right rally, like Charlottesville now is talking about racial equity all the time, but making it really practical in terms of, okay, how do we take the food system, the community food system, and look at equity and break it down into these practices? How do we make all the programs that are happen in a way that is more powerful, that's more reflective of like all the things you all said.
And make them know that food, that whole food system is a part of keeping people down as well.
Right.
You don't look at it that way, but once you break it down and you analyze it and you look at the long-term effects, like it's got to be something done.
Yeah.
There's got to be changes, because it's another way to just take folks out.
And following on with what you were saying, Chantel, my reason for wanting to participate in Game Changers is that we have touch points in the community through CSG's Gardens in the Schools, through UACC's Urban Gardening, and through CFJN's advocacy, food advocacy. And being able to bring some clarity and focus to that message so people understand who we are, and I think that focus and clarity will help us target. So I'm looking forward to this name change that we're talking about doing, because we are changing our name, which will then allow us to change our game.